a bit more about how like the divorce process affects wills and all of that kind of stuff? Because I think a lot of people, I mean, you get the decree nisi, you get the decree absolute. Does that mean different things? Can you talk us through that, please?
Yeah, so ultimately, until you are legally divorced, so until you've got the decree absolute, you are still in effect married. So, where I'm sure when someone separates, it's not first thing on their mind that, oh my God, I must go and sort my will out. But it should be high up there on that tick, that to-do list in effect that says, I need to sort this out, I need to sort that out. Because until that point, if you were to inherit anything or anything like that, it all falls into your estate. So it's important that you get that decree absolute as soon as you can. But it's also important that if you write a will, that will enable you to be able to channel your estate how you want it to go, rather than it going against the rules of what they call intestate, which is very much, husband gets or wife gets the first X amount of thousand, and then if you've got children, a proportion would go to the children and the rest to the husband. So it's important that, ultimately your wishes are honoured. And until you get that decree absolute, any will that you've written beforehand will still be valid. Once you're legally divorced, any will you've written before, it will treat your ex-spouse as having predeceased you. But it still, from a housekeeping point of view, you probably have named each other as executors within that will. You may well have named, each other's siblings as potential guardians. There's all of those things, and ultimately you probably left your estate to each other. So from a housekeeping point of view, if nothing else, it's a time where you can sit down and say, look, now these are my wishes, these are the people I want to deal with my estate, this is my side of the family that I would want to have the children if my ex has predeceased me, and this is how I would want my estate to be distributed, whilst also factoring in any commitments that you might have for the children's upbringing. So there's all an opportunity to really sit there and understand what is the situation now that you're on your own, but also understanding that if you did meet somebody else in the future, that you've got the ability to be able to make those amendments again. And for us, we offer a will storage facility where we store the wills, but that also gives you sort of free basic will amendments as well. So it's a document that will evolve over your life, but it's important that it's updated and kept updated. And key things like separation, finalising the divorce, getting married, all of those are so important to what should trigger that conversation to say, I need to do some forward estate planning, really. And I think the younger you can do it, the more it just feels like financial planning rather than, thinking about what you're planning for.
So as soon as you get sort of separate, can you write a new will that sort of, so you can write a new will for, say, example, if one of your parents did pass away and you did inherit, that it didn't go to the person you are divorcing.
Yeah, because ultimately, if you're depending on how your parents have set their will up, they may well have left it as like a discretionary trust, which then is you've only got a hope of receiving the money. So if there was a situation like a separation, the other spouse, it's not in your estate, it's sat in a trust. So the trustees could hold off giving you money. There's all things that can be done, but depending on how it comes into your estate. And if it comes into your estate and you have it in your sole account, then that's in your name to distribute as you would have wanted to have done. And it's important that if we're deliberately excluding people from the will, and whilst you're still married, they could see that you're doing that. It's if you come to a will writer, we would have wrote notes, etc., and made sure there was reasons as to why your estate is being distributed as you would have wanted it to have done. But as I say, we will also talk through the things like making sure that you're making provisions for it should something happen to you, that the upbringing of the children is still factored in respect to, whether it's guardians that need to look after them or your ex-partner, that you're making those in effect maintenance payments when you're not around. But it is important, whether you're, when, as I say, when you're separated and not legally divorced, you are still married. So therefore, if you passed away without a will, your ex-spouse would still factor in.
Yeah.
And as I say, getting divorced doesn't invalidate any previously written wills. So it's again important that we sit and review them to make sure that those key people that you had in them before are still the people that you would have wanted. And more often than not, if people do mirror wills, they put each other as their executors, for example, and I'm sure that wouldn't be the case, regardless of the fact the estate's probably going to them as well. It's just making sure that everything, I think, from a housekeeping point of view, is as you would have wanted it to be.
I can imagine if the last thing someone would want to say, your husband's had an affair and run off with a younger woman, and the last
Absolutely.
thing you want is for, if something happened to you, for them to inherit, and then your mother dies or something and they inherit all your money.
We can work with the clients as well to make sure that the property is owned in the right sort of way. So we can work with them to sever the tenancy. So rather than it being joint tenants, it's tenants in common. So then they've got their half of the property that they can then leave to whoever they want it to be, etc. So it is important that, whilst I appreciate it's not necessarily top of the list with everything that, having been through it myself, everything that you have to deal with, it is, having done the role now myself, you realise just how far up that list something should be.
Yeah.
And, for an hour and a half of your time to sit there and make sure it is what it needs to be is an hour and a half well spent in my eyes, and we then do everything else behind the scenes for the client. So, but making sure they understand exactly what it is they're doing and the potentials of where and what could happen.